Hello there, welcome to World Panorama, a show that keeps you up to date with all the latest happenings across the globe. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Here's a look at the top stories in the headlines. Coronavirus declared a global pandemic, more than 5,000 people dead. Italy, worst affected nation after China. WHO says Europe is now the epicenter. Spain and US declare national emergencies. India suspends visas, evacuates its citizens from affected countries. Hope and despair over US-Taliban peace deal. United Nations unanimously backs agreement. Taliban rejects Afghan government's phased release of prisoners. Political situation also unstable as a rival leader is sworn in as country's new president in separate ceremonies. Russian President Putin endorses plan to remain in power until 2036. Legislation approved by lower house of parliament needs approval by Russia's constitutional court and a public referendum to be held in April. Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein is sentenced to 23 years in prison after his sexual assault and rape conviction. Case hailed as a victory for #MeToo movement against sexual misconduct. And Joe Biden cements position as frontrunner in Democratic race to take on President Trump in November's White House election. At primary voting in 6 states on Tuesday, former Vice President extends substantial lead over main rival Bernie Sanders. The WHO this week declared the novel coronavirus as a global pandemic. More than 133,000 people have been diagnosed with COVID-19 in 123 countries around the world, and the total number of deaths has reached about 5,000. Europe is now the epicenter of the pandemic. This as several European countries reported steep rises in infections and deaths. Italy is the worst affected with 1,266 deaths and around 18,000 infections overall. US President Donald Trump on Friday declared a national emergency to free up $50 billion in federal resources to combat coronavirus. Spain also announced emergency. India has suspended all visas for a month to halt the spread of COVID-19. Since the first cases were confirmed in December 2019, the flu-like COVID-19 virus has exploded into a global pandemic, killing thousands of people and infecting over 1 lakh, with scientists scrambling for a vaccine. While declaring the novel coronavirus outbreak as a pandemic, WHO chief said the number of cases outside China has increased 13-fold in 2 weeks.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
China remains the country with the most coronavirus cases and related deaths by a significant margin. However, in recent weeks, China has seen fewer and fewer new cases per day, while the count in places like Italy, Iran, Germany, France, and the US have risen. China is limping back to normalcy, with many major industrial enterprises resuming normal operations. It is outside China where the mayhem is right now. Italy, the worst affected country outside China, announced tough new restrictions on Wednesday, closing all shops except food stores and pharmacies as part of its nationwide lockdown. The country also vowed to spend up to $28.3 billion plan to fight coronavirus. The week also saw US President Donald Trump announcing sweeping new travel restrictions on Europe in a bid to combat the spread of the coronavirus. All travel from European countries has been suspended for the next 30 days. There are currently more than 1,300 confirmed cases of the virus in the US.
We're in great shape compared to other places. We are in really good shape, and we want to keep it that way. That's why I did the ban with respect to Europe.
Several high-profile individuals across the globe have tested positive for coronavirus. Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, the wife of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, tested positive for coronavirus. The couple is now self-isolating. Earlier, UK Health Minister Nadine Dorries and French Culture Minister Frank Riester were diagnosed with coronavirus. Legendary Hollywood actor Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson and Italian soccer club Juventus defender Daniel Rugani also tested positive. The advisor of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei also died of the coronavirus. The virus's spread is having significant knock-on effects on the global economy and daily life. Markets worldwide have reacted negatively, forcing finance officials and central banks to take action. Public functions across the globe have been cancelled or postponed. Major tourist hubs across the globe are closed. Nepal's government has shut off Mount Everest. Governments have shut schools and universities, US universities opting for online classes. Movie theatres are being closed and the release of several movies, including Walt Disney Company's epic action movie, Mulan, and Universal Pictures' 9th Fast and Furious film have been postponed. Courts are holding video hearings, even churches have moved services online. Sporting events like F1 Australia GP are being cancelled or played behind closed doors. But authorities say cancelling or postponing Tokyo Games is not being considered at the moment. Though US President Donald Trump has suggested delaying the Games for 1 year, saying the summer event would not be the same without spectators. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The United States won unanimous UN Security Council backing on Tuesday for the ambitious peace deal it signed with the Taliban, aimed at ending the long war in Afghanistan and bringing US troops home. But in problems emerging on the ground, Taliban has rejected Afghan government's proposal of phased release of prisoners, saying it will not proceed with the intra-Afghan talks unless all Taliban prisoners are released. Further, Afghanistan's rival leaders were each sworn in as the country's new president in separate ceremonies on Monday, throwing plans for negotiations into chaos. In addition, a top US commander says that Taliban attacks are higher than allowed in the plan and that he will recommend against the full withdrawal of American troops if that continues. After an uptick in violence in Afghanistan reported immediately after signing peace deal, there were doubts over the accord that US and Taliban signed 2 weeks ago. But there are some positive developments on the ground that bode well for peace process. On Monday, the US began withdrawing its troops from Afghanistan as part of the agreement, promising to reduce its troops from about 12,000 to 8,600 within 135 days.
The signing of the U.S.-Taliban agreement in Doha, together with the realization of the U.S.-Afghan joint declaration in Kabul, laid the groundwork for the road ahead toward a lasting peace in Afghanistan. We know that the road ahead will be difficult. We expected it. We were right. The upsurge in violence in parts of Afghanistan over the last couple days is unacceptable. In no uncertain terms, violence must be reduced immediately for the peace process to move forward.
Further on Tuesday, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani approved the release of 1,500 Taliban prisoners in exchange for Taliban handing over 1,000 government troops. Further, if talks progress, the government has pledged to free 500 more Taliban prisoners every 2 weeks until a total of 5,000 have been released. Ghani had earlier refused to free prisoners as part of the US agreement with the Taliban. But Wednesday's decree signaled a softening of his stance. The prisoner release is intended to build trust between both sides and kick off direct talks to end the 18-year war in Afghanistan. The talks were due to start on Tuesday, but negotiations were delayed by demands over the prisoner release. Now, talks between the Afghan government and Taliban will take place in parallel with the release.
Our responsibility is assuring peace and ending the 40 years of war. Be sure that a long-lasting peace will be coming with the courage of people and in the framework of the Republic.
Meanwhile, on Tuesday, in further victory for Afghan peace process, the United States won unanimous United Nations Security Council backing for the truce. The US-sponsored resolution welcomed the significant steps towards ending the war and opening the door to intra-Afghan negotiations, enabled by the US-Taliban joint declaration signed on 29th of February.
We were pleased to introduce this resolution endorsing the US-Taliban agreement and the US-Afghanistan joint declaration, and we appreciate the Security Council's support for this resolution and the constructive engagement of all of our colleagues during the negotiations. The support and engagement of the international community will continue to be critical in the next steps of the peace process.
But fresh political instability has threatened the prospect of talks between all sides in the country. Afghanistan's rival leaders, President Ashraf Ghani and his former unity government partner Abdullah Abdullah, were each sworn in as the country's new president in separate ceremonies on Monday, throwing plans for negotiations into chaos. Afghanistan's Electoral Commission says Ghani narrowly won September's vote, but Abdullah Abdullah alleges the result is fraudulent. The Trump administration lent its support for Ghani's presidency, but experts warn the current political rivalry could gravely affect the government's position during peace talks. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. A series of political moves in Russia's parliament have set the stage for longtime leader Vladimir Putin to serve as the country's president for another 16 years. The proposal passed by Russia's lower house of parliament opens the door for the 67-year-old Putin, who has already ruled for more than 20 years, to serve as many as 2 more 6-year terms, potentially extending his rule over Russia to 2036, when he would be 83 years of age. The Russian president is required by the constitution to step down in 2024 when his second sequential presidential term ends. But the motion proposed in parliament would amend the constitution in a way that would reset Putin's presidential term count back to 0. Groundwork laid for Russian President Vladimir Putin to remain in office until 2036. In an abrupt move on Tuesday, Russia's lower house of parliament, State Duma, proposed a constitutional amendment that would reset presidential term limits to 0. The amendments were put forward by MP Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space and a strong supporter of the Putin presidency. The amendments mean Putin could potentially stay in power until 2036 by winning 2 more 6-year terms. Putin has already endorsed the amendments but said the legislation must first be approved by Russia's constitutional court, which is largely a formality given the country's tightly controlled politics.
In principle, this option would be possible, but on one condition: if the Constitutional Court gives an official ruling that such an amendment would not contradict the principles and the main provisions of the Constitution.
In his address to Parliament, Putin said that while he disagreed with the idea of getting rid of presidential term limits altogether, he was open to his own term limits be reset to 0. After no objection from Constitutional Court, Russia will hold a public vote on 22nd of April to decide if constitutional changes will go ahead.
Addressing citizens, I would like to say, as you decide, dear friends, as you vote on 22nd April, so it will be.
2 апреля. Так и будет.
Putin, who was a security agency officer earlier, has been in power for 20 years. In January this year, he triggered an intense debate about changing the constitution, introducing a series of constitutional reforms, all of which look to be paving the way for him to step aside from the presidency, but consolidate and retain power in some other way. But on Tuesday, he largely dispensed with that idea and opted for the more straightforward route, just staying president. Saying stability is the country's primary need at the moment, Putin said that in future, when Russia is stronger, the people in power could be changed regularly.
Почему? Все юридически.
Today we could lift the presidential term limits, especially because such precedents exist in other countries, including our neighbors. There are no term limits in the elections procedure of a head of state.
То я не вижу необходимости в засрочных выборах Государственной Думы.
The developments come as Russia, like the rest of the world, is bracing for the coronavirus and the economic pain that comes with it. On top of that, Moscow is currently in a spat with Saudi Arabia over oil prices, threatening a key source of revenue for the Kremlin. Experts say in the face of these looming crises, Putin is looking to sell his extended leadership play as necessary for stability. There have been some protests against Putin's initial proposals to change the constitution, but resistance may be even harder now as officials take measures to limit public gatherings because of the coronavirus. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Harvey Weinstein, the titan of Hollywood turned convicted rapist, was sentenced to 23 years in prison on Wednesday in New York. He was found guilty of criminal sexual act and rape in a trial last month. A dramatic fall from grace for one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Dozens of women have come forward with allegations of sexual misconduct, including rape, against Weinstein since October 2017. Weinstein still faces at least one more prosecution, if not more, in Los Angeles.
This is what justice looks like. 20 plus 3 years sentence handed down by Judge Burke this morning.
Witnesses against Harvey Weinstein all smiles, coming out of a court in New York after the former movie producer was sentenced to 23 years in prison on Wednesday. This following his sexual assault and rape conviction last month. The case was hailed as a victory for the #MeToo movement against sexual misconduct. Weinstein was found guilty of committing a first-degree criminal sexual act against a production assistant in 2006 and of a third-degree rape of an aspiring actress in 2013. The two sentences will run consecutively.
The judge sent a message today that this type of behavior is something that any potential offender is going to have to consider. The judge obviously took it seriously, which is exactly how we think he should have been with rape.
The 67-year-old former Hollywood mogul appeared in court on Wednesday in a wheelchair. His lawyers had appealed for leniency, saying even the minimum sentence of 5 years could be a life sentence. But prosecutors argued Weinstein should be given the maximum possible sentence given his lifetime of abuse towards women. Weinstein also addressed the court personally, in which he implied that he had been confused in his dealings with the women. His lawyers have vowed to appeal against his conviction.
That sentence that was just handed down by this court was obscene. That number was obnoxious. There are murderers who will get out of court faster than Harvey Weinstein will. That number spoke to the pressure of movements and the public.
These were the first charges to make it to trial. Weinstein still faces further criminal charges for rape and sexual assault in Los Angeles, where officials have started extradition proceedings.
Well, I think when this story broke, it was only the tip of the iceberg. And broke, so I feel like we are slowly exposing that giant piece of ice underneath. And I think there's going to be more. I feel like there is, we've started something that has ignited a conversation and a need for women to really share their truth that is unstoppable right now.
I think the women who came forward throughout this whole process have been incredibly courageous, and the fact that they have their experience has been honoured and respected, and justice has been served to some degree. I think it's a huge, profound relief, not just for those people involved, but I think for the criminal justice system generally.
For a long time, there were no consequences, and a lot of people thought that they could get away with anything, and I think that now that is going to change, and I think that also women are going to feel empowered to speak their truth and demand to be respected.
Allegations against Weinstein began to emerge in October 2017. Weinstein issued an apology acknowledging that he had caused a lot of pain, but disputed the allegations. As dozens more accusations emerged, Weinstein was sacked by the board of his company and all but banished from Hollywood. A criminal investigation was launched in New York in late 2017, but Weinstein was not charged until May 2018 when he turned himself into police. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Joe Biden has cemented his position as the front-runner in the Democratic race to take on President Donald Trump in November's White House election. At the primary voting held on Tuesday in 6 states, the former vice president won 4, extending his lead over main rival Senator Bernie Sanders. The former vice president had lagged behind his Democratic rivals in the early voting states, but rebounded after big wins on Super Tuesday and endorsements from several former nomination rivals. It is now unclear if his rival Sanders would fight on until the party convention in July.
Joe Biden looking more and more like the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. He added to his delegate lead on Tuesday with another set of primary victories that further deflated Bernie Sanders' campaign. 6 states, Washington, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi, Idaho and North Dakota voted on Tuesday. Biden won 4, with Michigan being the night's biggest prize, awarding 125 of the night's 352 delegates. Thanking supporters on Tuesday evening, Biden said Democrats, including supporters of Bernie Sanders, could beat Donald Trump.
To all those who have been knocked down, to all those who have been counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just over a week ago, many of the pundits declared that this candidacy was dead. Now we're very much alive. And although there's a way to go, it looks like we're going to have another good night.
It has been an amazing turnaround for former Vice President Joe Biden. His campaign looked all but lost at the start of the primary season in February. Biden finished a poor 4th in the Iowa caucuses and 5th in the New Hampshire primary. But the turn came with South Carolina, where he won due to the support of the large African American community. And on 3rd of March, Super Tuesday, he won 10 out of 14 states at stake, establishing a sizable lead over Bernie Sanders.
While our campaign has won the ideological debate, we are losing the debate over electability. I cannot tell you how many people our campaign has spoken to who have said, and I quote, "I like what your campaign stands for. I agree with what your campaign stands for. but I'm going to vote for Joe Biden because I think Joe is the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump.
It is unclear if Sanders would fight on until the party convention in July. The Democrats' next big election milestone is in a week's time, when 577 delegates are up for grabs. To secure the nomination, a candidate needs the support of 1,991 delegates. Sanders enjoys widespread support among young voters, but has so far failed to turn that into electoral success. Now, barring some sort of drastic change in the race, his recovery seems unlikely.
So Joe Biden and I have our differences, and I'm going to articulate them. But at the end of the day, Joe has made it clear he will support me if I win. I am making it clear I will support him. If he wins, together we're going to go forward and defeat Trump.
It is noteworthy that US presidential nominees are being chosen through a series of primaries and caucuses in every US state and territory that began in Iowa on 3rd of February and ends in Puerto Rico in early June. The Republican nominee will be Donald Trump. Even though technically he has a challenger, he is so popular among Republicans, he has a clear run ahead of him. And as far as Democratic Party is concerned, there have been lengthy internal debates aimed at deciding which candidate has the best chance of denying Trump a second term in office this time. Once a crowded field of more than 24, the Democratic contest is now a race between two white males in their 70s, Joe Biden, a moderate, and Bernie Sanders, a staunch left-winger, offering starkly different visions for America's future. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And finally, if you are a cat lover, then you're going to love this museum in Poland. From cat-shaped soap dispensers to snow globes, pillows and paintings and porcelain figurines, the museum is dedicated to all things feline. Cat lover Natalia Koshevaya started her collection 15 years ago when she was given a cat figurine by her friends, and since then it has ballooned to include thousands of cat-themed items from all around the world. Koshevaya says that she plans to expand the museum and add to her collection of felines, this time by adding a room for real cats to live and, most importantly, nap in. So take a look at this tiny cat museum. As I take your leave, I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.